For 400 years, the Israelites suffered under the cruel rule of Pharaoh, bound in slavery, their cries for deliverance rising up to the heavens. Their backs ached under the weight of labor, their hands cracked and bleeding from shaping bricks in the scorching Egyptian sun. Mothers held their children close, whispering prayers for freedom, for salvation. But as the years passed, hope seemed like a distant dream. Yet God had not forgotten them. In the midst of oppression, a Hebrew mother, Jochebed, looked upon her newborn son with both love and terror. Pharaoh had commanded that every Hebrew baby boy be thrown into the Nile, a decree that sent waves of grief through every Israelite household. But Jochebed would not surrender her child to death. She wove a basket of reeds, sealing it with tar, and placed her precious son inside, her tears falling upon his tiny face. "Go, my son. May the Lord watch over you," she whispered, her voice trembling. The river carried the basket gently, guided by unseen hands, until it drifted into the palace gardens. There, Pharaoh's daughter stood by the water's edge. She gasped as she saw the small basket nestled among the reeds. Curiosity turned to compassion as she opened it and found the baby crying. "This must be a Hebrew child. Yet, I cannot turn him away. I will raise him as my own," she said softly, her eyes filled with wonder. And so, the child was named Moses and was brought up in the splendor of the Egyptian palace. He wore fine linen, dined with princes, and learned the wisdom of Egypt. But though his body lived in Pharaoh's house, his soul belonged to his people. Years passed, and Moses grew into a man, his heart torn between two worlds. One day, while walking among the Hebrew slaves, he saw an Egyptian taskmaster ruthlessly beating an Israelite. "Please, mercy!" the Hebrew slave pleaded, barely able to lift his head. Something within Moses broke. "Enough!" Moses shouted, his breath heavy with fury. He struck the Egyptian down, his hands trembling as he realized what he had done. Fear gripped him. He buried the man's body in the sand, hoping no one had seen. But the next day, he discovered his crime was known. Pharaoh sought his life. Moses fled into the wilderness of Midian, his heart heavy with exile. There he built a new life, marrying the daughter of Jethro and tending sheep in the quiet hills. Yet deep inside, he knew his past and his people were not forgotten. One day, as he led his flock, he saw a sight unlike any other, a bush engulfed in flames, yet not consumed. "Moses! Moses!" a voice called, deep, powerful, yet gentle. Moses fell to his knees, his voice shaking. "Here I am!" "Take off your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I have seen the suffering of my people, and I have heard their cries. I am sending you to Pharaoh. You will lead my people out of Egypt," the voice commanded. "But Lord, I am not eloquent. How can I do this?" Moses hesitated, afraid. Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will be with you. With his brother Aaron as his voice, Moses returned to Egypt. He entered the grand halls of Pharaoh's palace, standing before the man who ruled the greatest empire in the world. "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go," Moses declared firmly, his eyes blazing with divine purpose. Pharaoh leaned back on his throne, smirking. "Who is this Lord that I should obey him? The Hebrews are mine. I will not let them go." And so, the plagues began. The Nile, lifeblood of Egypt, turned to blood. Frogs swarmed the land. Darkness fell upon Egypt for 3 days. Hail, locusts, boils, each plague more severe than the last. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. Then, the final plague came. At midnight, the firstborn of Egypt perished, from Pharaoh's son to the lowliest servant. Only the Israelites, who placed the blood of a lamb upon their doorposts, were spared. In his grief, Pharaoh at last relented. "Go, take your people and leave," he said, barely able to speak. The Israelites left Egypt, a great multitude led by Moses, their hearts filled with awe and trembling excitement. But Pharaoh's regret turned to rage, and he sent his army in pursuit. As the Israelites stood trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's chariots, fear gripped them. "Moses, did you bring us here to die?" the Israelites cried in panic. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord," Moses declared, raising his staff. The wind roared, the sea parted. Walls of water rose on either side, and the people walked through on dry ground. Pharaoh's army pursued, their chariots thundering through the seabed. But as the last Israelite stepped onto the shore, the waters crashed down, swallowing the Egyptians whole. "The Lord has triumphed gloriously," the Israelites cheered, weeping in joy. In the wilderness, God provided manna from heaven, water from the rock, and led them with his presence. On Mount Sinai, Moses received the 10 Commandments, laws to guide his people. Yet even as Moses spoke with God, the people below turned to sin, crafting a golden calf to worship. Moses returned to them, his face burning with holy anger. "You have sinned against the Lord," he shouted, heartbroken. For 40 years, the Israelites wandered, learning obedience, learning trust. Though Moses himself would not enter the Promised Land, he stood on Mount Nebo, gazing upon it, knowing that God's promise was fulfilled. Before his death, he turned to his people once more. "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you," he said softly, yet full of wisdom. Moral of the story: the story of Moses is a testament to faith, courage, and obedience. No matter how great the challenge, God is always in control. He hears the cries of his people and delivers them in his perfect timing. When we trust him, even the most impossible paths open before us. Like Moses, we are all on a journey, facing trials, doubts, and fears. But through faith, we can overcome. May this story inspire you to walk boldly in God's purpose for your life, knowing that he will never leave you nor forsake you. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring Bible stories. Your support helps spread the message of faith and hope to others.